This is Remo Daily, your daily dose of inspiration. This is Remo Daily, an oasis of innovation for your mind, your soul and your heart. Connect, act, and recharge with Remote Daily. This is Remo. This is Remo Daily.
My bow to the gong. Thank you so very much. And here is for you, our guest of today. Welcome to the stage, Olivia Gambelin. So great to have you with us.
Thanks, Felix. I'm excited to be here.
Olivia, you may have seen it in the chat. Very interesting words came up: Russian troll farm, evil, destroy. And then there was a question from Sarah. Are you more of the school of thought that says the problem isn't the technology, it's how we use it? Or does that not reflect your view? So putting that back to you, what do you think when you look at the chat?
It's something I'm very used to seeing. And I am from that school of thought where we are humans and our technology is a reflection of us as humans. So what we're seeing in terms of these patterns and what sometimes may seem as evil are just reflections of things within society, things within ourselves that we have the chance now and the opportunity, now that we see it, to grow and improve on and actually become better as humans rather than better as technology.
Great. So we have to be better in order for this world to be better, the world of technology. As Yvonne says, AI is a reflection of humans is exactly what scares me. So this is another can of worms that we're opening. But let's talk about 3 examples here, because what you do and what you described at the beginning, and a lot of what you do is communication. You're writing a book, you're hosting a podcast, you're consulting. So a lot of what you do is communicating with humans in order to build systems that are better than the ones that are set up now. And let's talk about 3 examples where ethics, as for me as an outsider, as an observer, not as an AI expert, are clearly a problem. First, let's talk about Facebook. How would you say Facebook is doing in terms of ethics right now, in your own words, in your own opinion?
So I have a good friend actually that I'm going to steal his words from. Dave over at Irving AI, he wrote a paper recently on actually Facebook's business model and how Facebook right now, the business model that they operate on is inherently evil. I'm going to use quotation marks there, meaning unethical in the sense of it's built off of driving revenue from advertising. And so it's designed this end goal of you must stay on the platform for as long as possible, whatever it takes to keep you on that platform, because it's generating revenue from advertising. That in itself is inherently, I'm not going to say corrupt, but inherently that's not a good end goal to work towards. It's the original end goal of Facebook was for people to communicate with each other, to actually be able to talk with someone that was overseas from you. I mean, I travel all the time. I am nomadic by nature. And so for me, being able to connect with someone, especially my family in a different country, is very important. That is a great end goal to work towards. But we've lost sight of that, especially Facebook has lost sight of that. And now it's gone towards, well, can we increase that profit margin? Can we hold people on this platform longer and longer? Because if we hold them, the longer we hold them, the more we have in revenue from those advertising sales. So in that sense, we're not actually looking at the technology. I can go into the technology and the different recommendation systems and the algorithms behind Facebook and the problems that exist there. But really what it boils down to is that the end goal that Facebook has now started to work towards needs an update.
It's enough. Would you have another recommendation of what their business model could be, should be?
Again, I think it's going back to what they originally started for, where it's looking at how do we connect people to people, and having the end goal not be let's stay on the platform, but the platform as a means to an end. And that end being I'm connecting with a loved one, or I'm connecting with a group where I feel accepted, where I feel like my voice is heard, or I can identify with other people within that. If that's the end goal, it starts to trickle down and change the rules of the game rather than us trying to change the rules of the game when the end goal won't allow for that.
Well, a lot of media companies will, gladly accept what you just said. And I also just read a phrase saying the word monetize never, ever led to anything great. So let's see how they move forward. Second one. And by the way, I see Annalena is with us today. Welcome back. Annalena works designing at Airbnb, designing experiences there. So if you want to chime in later, Annalena, and tell a little bit about what you and your company thinks about ethics, you're welcome, as is everybody else, by the way. Let's switch to example number 2. We all probably have seen these videos. They scare me. I have to say, they scare me every time. Boston Dynamics and their humanoid robots is something, the videos are created in a way that is absolutely genius. You create an emotional connection with this thing, and you feel with it when it falls down, when it, when it cheers, when it jumps, when it does something that resembles our movements. You actually create an emotional connection, and you start thinking, hey, machines, not so bad. So for the expert, Olivia, this is marketing, of course, but what do you think about Boston Dynamics ethics at this point?
So again, I'm going to refer to another paper written by another friend, Lydia Kostopoulos. She wrote about the, this word always trips me up, anthropomorphization of AI and robotics, where we are naturally, as humans, putting this sense of humanity onto the robots. We do this with everything, even say like a coffee cup or something. We'll name something and we'll make it have a personality when it's not actually there. The risk here with robotics is when we actually start to believe it. So you have Sophia the robot, for example, who was given citizenship. To me, I see that as a huge concern, because that is essentially assigning a type of agency, a moral agency, to something that doesn't have the ability to reason emotionally, morally, yes, maybe intellectually to a certain point, but not in the same capacity that we as humans do. So it's assigning a sense of humanity to something, well, we will naturally assign humanity to, but it's giving that level of consideration and respect within our own reasoning systems that it doesn't actually have the ability to uphold. It doesn't have the ability to empathize, essentially. I can boil it down to that, where there's no sense of empathy from that robotic. We can empathize with it. We're like, yes, okay, you fell down and you got back up. Yes, we're empathizing literally with that machinery. It cannot empathize with us. And I think that's where some of the main concerns with these kind of advancements, where they come from, and the fact that we're trying to mimic humans. Well, there needs to be that difference. I can rely on the fact that I know you will empathize with me as a human being. And so I can not play to your emotions, but I can appeal to your empathy if I'm ever in a place of need. And you, same in reverse, you can do the same for me. I can't do that with a robot, though.
And of course, there was just a case here in New York City where New York Police Department showed up at a housing project with a robot dog, and it created a huge backlash. Is that something where you get engaged, where you actually call up people and say, okay, let's do something? Do you kind of like switch into activist mode when something like that happens?
I have been called an activist, and it's something that always takes me by surprise, because I don't see myself as someone that's going to storm the streets and shout and protest. I see myself as someone that I want to listen to you from where you're coming from. Why do you think this? Explain it to me. And I want to understand where you're coming from. And from there, try and explain my point of view, my perspective, and have that mutual respect in that conversation of, I understand that I have different experiences and a different skill set, as do you. And let's see where that mismatches. And maybe through that process, we'll both learn. And again, I'm secretly hoping that I can convince you that you can't empathize with robots, and that you need to have that sense of compassion that is something uniquely human. But at the end of the day, I can only do that if I sit and I spend the time to understand where you're coming from.
So our topic today is how to be brave in tech, and it might be it feels like the contrary to what we're discussing right now. Because when I think about being brave in tech, I always think about this famous Facebook slogan of fail fast, and break things. That turned out to be not so great. We just discussed that for a lot of products. So how can we be brave in your sense? What is the bravery that you suggest that we should develop?
Yeah. So that fail fast, fail often did work back in the day. That slogan's probably 10, 20 years old now. It worked really well to get the Silicon Valley bubble going. But now, as in with everything in life, it's time for, and I'm using the techie term right now, it's time for an update. We as people, as we mature in life, we constantly update our understanding of life and our place in this world. We are intaking, and again, I'm speaking really in techie terms right now, but this is what I'm used to when I'm speaking with clients, is speaking through the techie terminology. But we're constantly receiving all of these inputs from life. I'm on the street and I pass someone that's fallen over and I don't stop to help them. And then I see the consequences of my actions and I see, oh, that didn't make me feel good. It didn't make that person feel good. I'm going to update my understanding and know that next time I pass someone that's fallen on the street, I'm going to stop and I'm going to help them. That's me maturing morally. And so what I mean in terms of bravery in the face of technology is looking at the fact that, we started this whole tech era with that mantra, fail fast, fail often. That worked back then. It's time to bravely face that and update it, which means we actually have to be very self-reflective as humans and embrace what I think is chaotic beauty, the messiness that it means to be human. We need to actually face that and look at it critically and go, okay, is it really fail fast, fail often? Or now is it embracing the fear of actually that self-reflection and getting over that fear, looking at it going, I am afraid of taking the moment to slow down and analyze my actions and analyze my impact because I'm not sure what I'm going to find, but I'm going to do it anyway because I know that this is something I need to do now. So that's what I mean in terms of bravery in the face of technology. We're updating the end goal of our technology, but we're also having the courage to ask ourselves, is this really what I need to be working for?
So instead of fail fast and break things, it's kind of like slow down and self-reflect. Could be a new saying on the wall.
Yeah. Like, have you ever heard of the slow food movement in Italy?
Yeah.
It's this whole movement where they locally source all of their produce and products that they use in their dishes. And the whole purpose of a slow food meal is to take as much time as possible eating it. And it's something beautiful if you've ever experienced one of these. And it was done in exact opposite of the fast food movement. And so slow food for me, I think is a fantastic analogy for what I think in terms of technology of take the time, embrace the process, and take the time really to understand and analyze the impact that you're having, where you're bringing in your resources from, your employees, your vendors, everyone. And instead of having productivity for the sake of productivity, actually asking yourself, what I'm doing getting me closer to my end goal, or just having me check off my to-do list for the day?
And your Nana would be so great. So proud to see that you just recommended an Italian initiative. I posted the link in the chat. Slowfood.com. It really emerged from Italy, and I think it's very much alive there and has always been. Let's go into solution stage because Heidi already put it in the chat. Always so great to see Heidi here and other people joining from various time zones. Very good morning to you, Heidi, who is saying, what kind of work is being done to reproduce empathy in AI? And what do you think of the value of empathetic AI? Is empathy programmable? So let's go into solution stage and say, okay, somebody goes to you with a code and says, Olivia, what can I write into this that actually produces empathy in the outcome?
Okay, so I might go a little bit philosopher here actually to answer this question. There's a difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy means I can see your situation that you're in, and by the factors of that situation, I see that you are sad. Meaning, I see you and I see that you have broken your favorite mug. And now I've never broken my favorite mug. I have not been through that experience. I don't know what it's like to feel that, but from past experiences and from my input, from my code, I understand, okay, broken mug equals sad. Done. I can sympathize with that. I know that you're going to be sad in that moment. That is different than empathy. Empathy means I've also broken my favorite mug. And so when I sit there and I see that you've broken your favorite mug and I've broken my favorite mug in the past, what happens is it recalls the same emotions in me. So I'm sitting there going, oh, I feel sad because you broke your favorite mug. I can relate to that. I know how, at least in some semblance of how you're feeling. And so I can go off of those past emotions, not input, not proxy data, so to speak. Again, I'm bringing in techie speak here. I'm not bringing in proxy data. I'm bringing in the actual data points of how I have felt in that moment and going, I understand how you feel. And so from that perspective, that was my little philosopher sidebar. But from that perspective, we cannot code empathy. We can code perhaps sympathy in actions where we can program into, say, a system or a robot of, person breaks mug, person is sad, done. But we cannot code empathy. That line of code, that robot will never know what it feels like to actually, breaking your favorite mug. I know it's not a catastrophe, but I'm drinking from my favorite mug right now. So this is where my mind is at, but they will not know what it feels like. And so that's the difference. You cannot code empathy. You can code semblances of it, and you can code, let's say, the ability and tools to help recognize difficult situations, to then that point allow a human to come in and say, oh, I recognize this situation. I have felt similar in this situation, or I have had a similar situation where I also have felt in this way. But again, that empathy comes back. That is something uniquely human at the end of the day.
And Anne just posted, thank goodness we cannot program empathy. That would be too scary, a machine knowing how we actually feel. So I guess there is a barrier that machines will never be able to cross. And I think it was a clear answer to Heidi's question. Heidi, if you disagree, please post a follow-up. It is not programmable. However, though, Olivia, you're recommending very concrete steps for companies, especially startups, to take to get ethics into their system from the beginning, to actually code sympathy, if not empathy. And one of your suggestions that I heard about was that you actually recommend for companies to hire people that sit in that department, like an ethics owner that is a part of every team, or a chief ethics officer. Now, I just went on LinkedIn before today's Remote Daily, and I just typed in chief ethics officer because I was just curious, like, is anybody looking for chief ethics officers? I found three companies that are chief ethics and conduct. There is a chief ethics and compliance executive assistant. I think there's a general counsel, chief ethics and compliance down here. So how would you describe the job market for people doing the things that you recommend at the moment? Like how many companies do actually add chief ethics officers or ethics owners to their teams? Is that actually playing out? What status? What do you see happening at the moment?
Yeah, so we're at the very beginning of this. So I've been active in this field for 5+ years. And when I started, there was no such thing. There were no ethics owners. There were no ethics officers. It was me telling people I am an AI ethicist, which I am by training. But me saying to people, I am an AI ethicist, and people going, what is that? And having to walk through, well, I work on the ethics of the technology and so on and so forth. Now what we're seeing is this is actually becoming an established career path. I'm very active in the space and actually trying to establish a pipeline for this. Since I work closely with academics, I see all these brilliant young minds, especially coming out of master's, postdoc degrees, where they're going, I want to work in this space. Where are the opportunities? We're seeing it under a couple different names, like responsible technologist, responsible innovation. Sometimes this gets grouped under compliance, but an AI ethicist, or just tech ethicist in general, is a very, very specific skill set. And what it essentially means is, myself as an AI ethicist, I am trained at recognizing situations that require certain decisions. Let me go further into that. when it comes to decisions that we make in life, we as humans are accustomed to making ethical decisions and moral decisions in our personal life. It's part of being human. When it comes to our technology, our personal moral decision is not just the moral decision for ourselves. Now it's the moral decision for 10, 20 million different users that are using the product that we've just made a decision on. So in that case, the ethicist that comes in and works with the technology is someone that's recognizing that that decision that you are making in that one instance has that potential impact. Now, what I do is I look at what are the values, what are the principles, what are the higher end goals? Again, very abstract concepts. So let's say you usually hear transparency and privacy and responsibility thrown around in relation to AI. So I'm looking at this going, okay, we want a system that is transparent and responsible and respects user privacy. What does that actually mean, though, when it comes to the person that's coding it? What I do is I sit down and I go, let's break this down. What are the actual decisions that you need to be making? Is it black or white? Is it one or two? And it's that ability to translate those high level values into decision-making factors when it actually in those critical points. That is what an ethicist does. And so slowly but surely, especially in tech, and now you're getting me all excited and I'm going on a soapbox, but especially in the tech industry, people are starting to understand that skill set is a skill set. Just like, we had data scientists years ago that had a title that didn't, knew what a data scientist was. Now every company hires a data scientist. AI ethicist, tech ethicist in general is on that same projection.
So what would be a typical skill set? We have people here in the room with various skill sets, from tech to HR to L&D to business administration to education. What is a skill set for somebody with that role?
Yeah, so I always say, first and foremost, you'll usually finding us coming out of philosophy. In philosophy, we're trained to continuously ask why. We're literally trained to do this job in the sense of, I am trained in going through a philosophy education on understanding arguments, understanding decisions, and understanding how to break them down, and what kind of just minor tweaks of little decisions can have what kind of impact. I am trained literally to ask why at every single step of the way forward, and to understand how to answer that why. And that's really what I'm doing as an ethicist. And so a lot of times you'll see us coming out of philosophy or out of careers such as compliance or risk, will often or now into ethics as well.
Yeah, I saw on LinkedIn the requirements for the jobs that were listed were a lot in the legal side of things as well. So, but Rashad and Anne making very interesting points here in the chat. Rashad says in his job at Colgate-Palmolive, it was actually a chief ethics and compliance officer, but they had no oversight. They had no over tech or AI or anything. They had no seat at that table to actually ask why. And that, of course, leads to the question that Anne is posting here. Where does this person actually sit? What power does this person have? Because this person, by asking why, is going to slow things down. And you probably, when you come into a company, you have that same problem, right? You slow things down because you're like, whoa, hold on a second. Why are you doing this? And I was like, oh my God, here we go again. So how is that going to work for an ethics person in a company to actually gain power?
So I like to flip this on its head, because I actually argue that I don't slow things down. Maybe in that exact moment of making that decision, it might take a few hours, maybe an hour longer. But by working with an ethicist, you're working with someone that already understands these problems. So first of all, you're not lost in the Google black hole of Googling, what does this mean? How does this work? You're working with someone that knows. And so they can immediately set you on the right path of, okay, here are X, Y, and Z. This is what we need to consider. And from there, what I'm actually doing when I'm working with you and asking why is I'm setting you up for success. So you're no longer doubting yourself throughout the process and having to go and fix things later in the future. So you make a choice, you go down, you're doubting, you're like, was that the right choice? I'm not sure. And constantly you're thinking to yourself, I don't know. And that leads to mistakes or missteps And then you actually have to go back and fix those. And fixing them in retrospect is a lot more difficult than fixing them up front. Instead, when you're working with me, when you're working with my team, when you're working with ethicists, what you're doing is right from the very beginning, you're understanding exactly what you're creating. You have an in-depth, intricate, intimate knowledge of what you're creating. And that allows you to make decisions with confidence and actually much quicker. Because what you're doing is, instead of going, have I considered everything? I'm frozen in place going, I don't know, there's so much and I'm scared that I've made the wrong decision. You get to sit there and you go, I know this like the back of my hand, inside and out, both good and bad. I don't have that founder biased. I don't have that creator biased. I actually know exactly what I'm creating. And so I'm going to make these decisions quickly with confidence. And if I'm stuck, I have someone that already knows how to walk me through this rather than going down the endless pit of blog posts.
Very interesting. To me, what I'm learning here is I thought of somebody like you coming into a company would be on the tech side of things, but you're saying philosophy. Heidi says in the chat, it's similar to coaching. It is actually a completely different job to tech. It is actually sitting on the table with tech, but having a non-tech perspective. And as Yvonne says in the chat, slowing things down to speed them up later. And Sarah says, well, this work also has the potential to save the company a lot of pain when it ever comes, when bad things happen. You can go back and say, hey, listen, when we set this up, we set it up for success. And we were thinking about these issues from the very beginning. So let's see where this is actually happening right now. Is there a company that you may just maybe place a chief ethics officer into? Or is there a company you're working with? Or is there a company on your radar where you say, yeah, they're doing it right?
Of course, in this instant, I am going to, in this sense, I'm going to brag about one of our, clients, not in the sense of, oh, we have these clients, but in the sense of the people and the clients that we work with really are companies that are looking at this going, we are going to be brave. We're going to take the first step. And we know that this will give us the competitive edge also in the long run. It really is the vanguards leading right now. I'm trying to think of the best one to talk about. Well, let's start with this week. We just kicked off a project with the Royal Bank of Scotland. We're going to be working with their data scientists and developing a fairness framework. Essentially, they sat down and they went, fairness is incredibly important, especially when it comes to people's finances and working with individuals in terms of retail banking. And they went, we need to be prepared. We have an understanding that fairness exists. We have an understanding that this is in regulation, but we want to make sure that we're ahead of the game on this. So we're going to be sitting down for the next 4 months with their data scientists going through exactly how do you work and what kind of checks and balances can we put in so that fairness really is being incorporated from the by design. We'll say that's in terms of technicality term, it's fairness by design from the very beginning. So that's a great example. I'll stop there. I can really keep going because I'm so excited by the people that I get to work with because they're really very, very passionate and they come in going, I want to do better. I want to do right by my technology, and they do carry through with it.
And of course, we have practitioners here in the room that can speak to that. Rashad is just thinking about, when you have a legacy company, how do you clean up past baggage? And when you have a startup with a history, it might be even harder because you watched a lot closer than the traditional corporation. So Annalena, if I may, I would just ask you to unmute and give us an insight. You're designing products at Airbnb, you're working with HR, with L&D. How do you think about this? And do you maybe have an ethics person already on your team? Welcome back.
Hi, good to see everyone. I don't want to give out any wrong information. I can just share what I know. So I work for the design department at Airbnb, and where we are having a really focus on is actually on inclusive design. So for instance, that if we design new products, be it what probably everybody knows, like that you can stay at someone's place, but also we are offering experience, those are really inclusive and also accessible. And just to give you one example, so Airbnb has their own research department as well. So if we speak about being inclusive, for instance, we did a survey and said, hey, if you can actually change your name so that a host does not see what your actual name is, or you can just give the name you want to be called at. And so we did some research with that and actually got some amazing feedback, especially also from the LGBTQ community, who said, how cool is that I can actually be called by the name I want to be called, and I don't have to check in with my legal name, which I don't identify with. And I think just thinking about those areas, if you do product design, I think is also super important, and has a little bit of overlap if you also think about ethic and how you want to be treated as human beings. And so this example just popped up into my mind.
Thank you so much, Annalena. I just pulled you out of the community by coming back the first time. Thank you for giving this super interesting example. Olivia, would you say this is in your category? This is what you do? Because that clearly is now part of an algorithm.
Yeah, exactly. In that case, what that would look like in terms of a project, if I had my team working on it, we would have sat down with you, Annalena, and gone, what are the values you're working towards? Inclusivity. Okay, what does that look like in action? Well, let's break it down. What are you doing in terms of the onboarding process of people coming onto the app using for Airbnb? What part of that may be making them feel like there's not that inclusivity, and how can we tweak it? And so it's going from that high level value down to exact details, just as you were saying.
And Rashad is saying, you know what, fairness, that's a loaded word. In my career, it showed up all the time, but it was actually never there. And I think in the current moment that we're in, with so many people not coming back to the office and not commuting and not being under the control of their supervisors on the floor, there might actually be a new chance to rediscuss what fairness means in the workplace. And maybe this is also part of what we're discussing here. This is what you do, Olivia, is part of a much greater movement that is going on and might only play out over the next year or so, when people start to recalibrate everything they think about fairness and inclusion in the workplace, because they finally have the power to. Joe Weldon, who's a dear member of this community, said the other day that the war for talent has been won by talent. So let's see if the talent has the chance to actually turn the table and bring more of that in what you do, Olivia. Last question, a little bit of a selfish one. So I have actually two. How could we at Remote Daily be more ethical? Do you have a spontaneous advice or maybe a question that we could ask or should ask ourselves?
You're putting me right on the spot. What I would ask you actually, and it's what I usually ask when I first getting to know a client or anyone that I work with, is what do you stand for? What are your values? And in your opinion, where do you lie on that? Are you close to achieving them? Could you do better? Do you feel like you've gone in the opposite direction? How do you feel about it? And that's usually the first point where you start, because although gut reactions, yes, aren't necessarily what we would say logical reactions, they do hint at something larger. And when you have a gut reaction of, I stand for honesty, but maybe I don't actually follow through on that, or I don't feel like I really stand for that. Well, dig deeper. Why are you getting that gut reaction? So I'm going to pose the question back to you, Felix, instead, and ask, what does Remote Daily stand for? And do you have that gut reaction that you are actually standing for it?
No, I'm really glad I asked this question because I don't have a clear answer to that. But the community has. We have had many questions similar to this one. And I usually, put others on the spot asking this question. But I think what we're trying to create is an open and honest and safe space where everybody can show up and bring their voice and be as they are. And that's what we're trying to do here every time we come together. And we also are doing this driven by our community. So we have no one telling us to do it. We do it because we want to. And that to me makes a huge difference. That said, last question, how can we support your work, Olivia? And I mean that in the literal sense. There's a lot of things out there in the world, but also in a metaphorical. How can we, in our everyday lives, support you and what you stand for?
So I'll start with the literal. From a personal standpoint, check out my website. I've got a book coming in the new year, and it's literally called Bravery in the Face of Technology. But my research usually focuses in on ethics, innovation, and bravery. So just following my research there. In terms of my company, Ethical Intelligence, I've got the shirt on today. We're launching a new quarterly magazine starting October 4th, actually. The first issue is going to be focusing in on ethics as a service. So visit our website, sign up with your email to subscribe, and that issue will be coming October 4th, and I'm very, very excited about that. And then metaphorically is back to this point of bravery, where you are, I want everyone to walk away, and when you have that sense of hopelessness when it comes to technology, which I know we often do, of I don't feel like I'm in control of my technology, or I don't feel like I'm in control of what I decide is a part of my technology. I feel like that's controlled by big tech or other companies or someone other than myself. Taking the moment and sitting with it and going, I am still in control in some way or another, but I can find where I'm in control, and that I can change. And it can be as simple as deleting social media off your phone if you find that that's something that is detrimental to your mental health, instead of saying, okay, well, everyone else always has social media and is always going on social media. You go, that's not good for me. I don't need it. And bravely deleting it. In that sense, those are small acts of bravery, but in the metaphorical sense, people can support the work that I'm doing by asking, why do you do what you do? And does this actually get you closer to what you would define as your good life, your fulfilling life? Or is this a distraction?
Very powerful words. What social media apps do you have left on your phone?
I have LinkedIn for work and Twitter, and that's about it. Sometimes Instagram, now that you're asking, but I locked myself out of the apps actually. So this is me speaking. I recognized that I would just doom scroll, and so I started locking myself out on purpose.
Wow, log out or lock out, so you are more ethical, and be brave about it and actually tell people that you do it is one step. And the other step is following the links that we just posted here in the chat and speak with Olivia, invite her, listen to her podcast, highly recommend it. Her podcast mic is in use right now, and you can hear this is a voice to follow and to spend more hours with. Very interesting podcast with AI experts across the spectrum. And I also want to say that what Sarah says, we learned a lot of very cool new terms from you. We want to give you some of our terms, which is our virtual glitter. So wherever you are around the world, let's give our kudos to Olivia Gambelin by spreading some virtual glitter for our guest today. Thank you.